Hi.
Hi.
I have to leave 30 minutes into our video today, but sorry.
Amy's on.
And yeah,
Facebook
Amy's
message.
via Facebook Skyping or video
Hi.
chat.
We're
There
making
she
it work.
is. Yeah. Hi, Amy.
Hi, guys.
Okay, so I guess what we kind of can start talking about is like acquisition learning and like the system of learning. I thought Crash. I really enjoyed reading like about Crash and his video. I guess I read on more information, but his videos because I had a hard time understanding what he was saying. But I really liked his theories and like how acquisition learning is basically all about like the one making sure like the students are wanting to learn and also making things like active or like in a fun way of learning. Like I know that definitely works for me. Like I did French in high school and I loved going to this one specific teacher because she had made games. Sorry, I didn't mean to touch you. She made games for like everything we did, and it really got the whole class involved to like know each other, to like practice our verbs out loud, and it was just all a lot of fun. But then there's other teachers who did not do that kind of activity. They were more like lecture based, and I did not learn as much because I put up that wall. But I don't know, what do you guys think about this theory?
I thought it was interesting because he said like acquisition was like 95% of adults learning a language and like 100% of children learning language. That's what he said. So it's like all about acquisition more than learning.
Yeah.
Like being in the environment,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is important because we talked about how like sometimes ELL kids get separated out of the classroom, and that probably really hurts their learning of the language because they're doing learning instead of acquisition. I think.
Yeah.
I think something else that he really pointed out was like the interaction between like with acquisition is like you need to be able to talk to your peers or your friends and your family, like, and without having that or without that even being an option in the classroom can really affect like second language learners.
Yeah, he mentioned that though grammar is important, he talked about how he has like a PhD in linguistics and grammar and stuff like that. Acquisition like trumps grammar, and they said maybe learning would be like 2 days acquisition, 2 days focusing on learning, and even that's not a good solution to just like quickly teach someone a language. I thought that was just like interesting because when we think of learning a new language, you think of like conjugating verbs and knowing where to put accents and things like that, but maybe if we learned how to speak it first, then it would be easier to learn all those different grammar rules.
Yeah, like we were in class Tuesday night, and there was a lady in our class that English is her second language.
Really?
And we were learning about verbs and stuff. Remember that? And like, she knew where all of the phrases went.
Yeah, we were talking about
over,
future, present, and past.
And I was like, what? I don't even know. She's like, because she learned it, but we acquired it, so I just instinctually know where things go.
So
sentence,
we all have to think about it,
Yeah,
I
and then I heard she translates everything into Spanish so she can understand it.
Who? Nelly?
Nelly from our class.
So much of her notes are in Spanish?
I guess she later on translates them into Spanish so she can understand.
Oh, that's
interesting.
That is really cool.
Like written code switching.
Yeah.
Amy, do you have anything you want to say? Sorry, I'm probably going to do this just because.
No,
yeah. I was comparing a lot of the, like, reading to, like, what I did in my German class, like, because that's learning a language, and the first 2 years I did really well because it was a lot of the drilling of vocabulary and grammar and everything, and then the next year we were supposed to speak it consistently in class. Like, we were not supposed to speak English, and my grade, like, was still an A, but, like, I was not absorbing as much because it was so much more intimidating, and, like, it wasn't just grammar anymore. And I think that it was in I think it was in the book, it was talking about that, how, like, you can do really well writing things down because you memorize it, but you don't know how to use it then. So
you think
that was,
like the acquisition was harder for you than the learning, probably?
I think the acquisition was more important, but it wasn't enforced the first 2 years of language.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know how to use that vocabulary that I had. I know a lot of words, I don't know how to use them.
I think, like, you brought up something that, like, you had a good point. Like, even though, like, you had when it came to grammar and everything and only speaking the language, or how even though you still had an A, you didn't feel as confident versus when you were like having A's and like actually understanding what was happening. Because that doesn't only happen in language classes. I mean, I remember going through high school and stuff, and I would have A's in my like math classes or never in my math classes. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. My English or like any of those other classes, but it didn't or history, and it didn't necessarily mean I was like grabbing or actually understanding the information to then use in like future situations. I was literally just using the information, taking those notes, memorizing it for those tests, and passing it just to get that grade. Even though like, and I think that's important like for us to like as future teachers maybe like have a purpose for why we're teaching it and how we can connect it to their outside life versus school. Because I mean, I know like we're gonna have to like match certain curriculums and stuff, but I mean, I always got frustrated because I didn't like, okay, yeah, I have an A in this class, which is cool, but I honestly don't remember anything I learned in it.
Kind of like when you're reading out loud in English classes, and they gave an example of like Yvonne when she was like trying to get her PhD, and or maybe she had already gotten her PhD, and she needed to talk to someone like one of her like peers in Spanish, and she was thinking more about like speaking proper like professional Spanish than she was about what the actual question was. And that goes back to like what I said about reading an English class, when you're like so nervous that you're gonna mess up a word before your turn that you're like literally just like rehearsing it in your head. You don't know what you're actually saying after you say it. You're just like, oh, thank God I didn't butcher it. Even though we speak English naturally, we just want to. Yeah, we want to sound. Well, some of us do. We just want to sound like we, like I don't know. We want to sound smart.
Yeah.
We want to sound good at it.
And from my experience, I was always taught Spanish at my house, right? But not like, oh, Daisy, you need to write it like this, because I would never write in Spanish. And once I got into high school, like my senior year, I got into a Spanish class just because I wanted to perfect my grammar. And I started to notice like the words I would use, he'd be like, no, like you have to do it the proper way. 'Cause, like a truck, I would say troca. And he'd be like, no, it's camioneta. So like to me it'd be like, well, it's the same thing, you know, as long as it drives, you know. And, or like parqueadero, I would say parqueadero, like parking. But he's like, no, es estacionamiento. So like the grammar, like the better way to say it, and I'm just like, what? Like,
it's funny though, because like the way you were saying it makes more sense.
Yeah, because
like,
it sounds like parking.
It sounds like some more similar.
Right?
Is it more? Was it more formal Spanish?
yeah, it was more of a formal Spanish, and then I started to learn about all the accents and how this has to go, and that got me so confused that I would be like, do I even know Spanish? Like, am I an actual Mexican? Like. So I'd be like, what? Like, it was hard, and I would go to my parents, but, like, my parents, like, stopped going to school, like, in elementary, so they don't know how to actually write good Spanish. So, like, they weren't much help, and even the teacher, like, I would go ask him, but he was just stuck in that proper Spanish, and then he was from Spain. So it was a whole lot different from, like, where I came from.
Even, like, different parts of Spain, the accents will be, like, different. I remember when I was looking to study abroad, I found this beautiful place called San Sebastian, and it's basically on the north of Spain, and it's like this beautiful, like, it's right on the ocean, and there's a little island right in front of it. It's like a surf town, basically, and I'm like, okay, that is it. That's where I want to go. They have surfing lessons. Like, I've always wanted to surf. And then I went and talked to, like, one of my, I know one of the Spanish teachers here. She's my mom's, like, best friend, and she's like, I mean, yeah, that's a beautiful place, and you should go there one day. But I don't think it's the best place to go to learn Spanish, because you're going to be learning a different dialect, because they speak, shoot, I'm not going to remember, like, it's like between Spanish and French. It's like a different...
Like vos?
What?
Like vosotros?
No, I mean, yeah, they have more formal, like, as they speak, but it's like a different dialect. I can't think. It starts with a B, I want to say. But it's basically like a Spanish and French, like, it's a different dialect of Spanish, basically. So basically you're learning this new accent, this new dialect, and then you're also trying to learn like the Spanish that you'll need to use when you come back to the States. So I decided to go somewhere else, because just even in Spain there's different kind of like languages, but I forgot. I think I just kind of connected to something you had said.
And then when my teacher would talk to us like about all of us in Spanish, be like nosotros, but he'd be like vosotros, you know, and they would throw all of us off because none of us were from Spain. And we're like, why isn't it nosotros? And he's like, well, I'm from Spain. So he would correct in his like country, and then we were corrected like in our country.
Yeah.
So just like confusing.
Yeah. I also think like when we were talking about like acquisition and stuff, I did so much better in my classes in Spain, which are higher division classes that I took, than I do here. Like, I'm trying to now double major in Spanish, elementary education Spanish, but like my first couple of grades I got in my Spanish classes here at Western are C minuses, and you need a C and above. I have like 2 C minuses, and the rest are like C's and above
Yeah.
for my Spanish. But I don't think I can be able to get that major unless I retake classes or take a test for me to actually like get that major, which I think sucks because it shows like I did better in higher division classes in Spain. Like you can ignore those minuses, just take it away, like hide it, and it's a C, like I passed.
Yeah.
But I think it shows like being like for second language learners here in the States, like being in a classroom and not being taken away by other students who also have like, you know, are learning a second language.
Yeah.
That's not gonna help them in any way. Like they need to be in that classroom where they're hearing it all around them.
Yeah.
Because that way it's more.
I thought it was interesting, this kind of going off topic, I was just looking through the notes, how they said that, like, acquisition, you learn how to, like, I don't know, you become familiar with, like, word order and, like, sentence structure and things like that, but vocabulary is something that you have to learn. It said that, like, the ability to acquire language is something that's innate within us, but, like, you have to learn the rules of the language that you're, like, speaking, which I thought was really interesting because it's, like, when you really think about it, you don't really start learning like grammar rules until like I don't know, like really hardcore. I'd say until middle school, and you already know how to speak and write and all of those things, but you don't really know how to like speak and write and do all of these things correctly until you become like at an older age.
Well, he said like in the video like that when somebody makes a mistake in English, that we don't always know what the mistake is. But because you just know you know that something is wrong.
I do that with myself all the time, and I have to correct. Like we were doing it the other day, me, you, and Natalia. We were like trying to figure out the different pronunciations of the word sing or the verb sing. Like is it sang or sung in this specific?
Or ran or run.
Yeah, ran or run or run. And I'm like, oh well, that's not it. And then it's so complicated.
Yeah.
And we don't really. I didn't even realize it until like now when I'm like learning it. And
even now it's confusing to me. Like, I don't know. It's funny how you can know English, but then you like grow up and you try to relearn it, and it's like, what? That doesn't make sense.
Like, wow, I do learn, or I do know like the most. It's in like English, one of like the harder languages to learn or something.
I think so because all of our rules are kind of different than other rules, but it's like at the same time, English I would say is easy to learn for if you know certain languages like German or French or things like that. We share a lot of like loan words with, or like a lot of like similar like pronunciations and things like that.
Emmy?
You
don't have to if you can. Sorry, I just want to make sure you feel included in this.
No, I was just thinking, like, my computer cut out for a second, so I don't know if Jessica said this while she was talking, but it's that whole, like, somebody who, like, even just a kid or just somebody who doesn't know English will ask, like, why is what I said wrong? And I'll be like, because it is. Like, I don't know why we say things the way we do sometimes, just because this is my first language and, like, I acquired it. Like, I don't know why we do the things, well, like, I'm learning about it, but, like, I don't know why, so it's weird to come across somebody and just, like, oh, like, this is how you say it, and they're like, why, though? Like, this makes sense to me. It's like, but you're wrong.
I also think it's weird how, like, obviously, like, language changes over time, and, like, I just thought about this the other day, like, as people come to the United States and, like, start learning English as their second language, whether they're, like, in their 50s, 40s, or if they're, like, you know, younger than 5, the language is different, so that the things they start picking up on or the way they start speaking is obviously different than the ways, like, we start speaking, and so, like, if we were to correct them, it's going to be different, because, like, now I feel like there's a lot of slang we have, like, people are just using a lot of slang for conversations, and my boyfriend's mom, like, because she came here, like, when she was older, like in her 30s or 40s, my boyfriend would tell me some of the things she says. And you would not think a mom would say those things, but because in the time that she came and those were the things that are being said for our younger generation, and as she was learning English, those are the things she picked up too. I don't like saying it, but like, because I don't support it at all. Okay.
The N-word?
Yeah, like, you know how people say it casually, just like N-I-G-G-A?
No.
I guess sometimes she calls her son that.
That's
because
funny.
That's her son
I mean, that's
listens
not
to
funny,
music.
but it's pretty good.
Because that's what, like, her
Yeah.
son listens to music that says that. And, like, so she'll hear those and, like, he'll say it sometimes, and he doesn't say it around me because I
And
don't
they say
feel
it so
comfortable,
casually.
but, like, exactly, but they say it so, like, sometimes when she'll texting him, she'll just say that.
My mom, similar thing. She came to America from Germany when she was 20 or 21 and started learning English in Queens, New York City. And so my
She
mom
should
said, and my mom is like a really like very white German lady. She says yo and word and like
You're like-
like all of those things way more than any 45-year-old white lady should. And it's cute, but at the same time it's like it's really interesting how like also the geographical location of where you learn. If she learned English in like Iowa or like Nebraska, she would talk way differently than she did since she did learn it in like New York.
And plus the accents that are that
Yeah,
happen
my mom
here.
gets so mad when I correct her on even like pronunciation. Like she can't pronounce th sounds, like that just doesn't come naturally to her.
Yeah, that's phonetically not in the German dialect.
Yeah, and
Just a fun fact.
so she'll say like mutter and like so, but I don't get this one because there's no th in soda, but she'll say soder. I don't get it, but she gets upset when I correct her for saying that. Or things like they don't say like aluminum foil. They say like they don't say aluminium though, but like she'll say tin foil because she just can't make her mouth say aluminum.
I can't either, so I say it in Spanish, aluminio.
That's really close to aluminum.
Yeah.
No, I just can't say it. Just say aluminio.
So my mom is one of 6, and they all live within Bellingham, well, mostly in Ferndale, one in Oregon. But like I've been working at my mom's store. It's my aunt's store, but my mom works there as a chef or like as the cook, and then my other aunt is a teacher at Ferndale, or like, but she comes in and does like later shifts, like lasagnas and frozen foods that they make.
Yeah.
And so yesterday I was there and I was making baklava, and all 3 of them are there together.
You should bring us some coffee.
I can bring you guys some baklava. I just found out the order I was working
I
for all
love
week isn't due until December, not November. Anyways, so I've been listening. My mom probably has like the best accent, or like her accent is almost gone. You can still hear it a little bit, but like my other 2 aunts, theirs are still pretty strong, one more than the other. And I find it interesting how they pronounce different words and how like they communicate, especially with like their employees there, because obviously their employees are below them because they're like the bosses or whatever, the sisters of the bosses. But I always find it super interesting after like learning everything I have in between this class and the other ELL class that we're taking. I just tend to like notice things more rather than it being normal, and I find it so interesting. I'll like correct them. I'm like, oh, this is why you can't pronounce this, or like this is why you struggle to pronounce this.
Mm-hmm.
I find that very like.
Do they ever judge your mom for like kind of losing her accent when she goes back to her town?
My mom hasn't been back to Lebanon. Well, she's went once a couple years ago, but she speaks Arabic. Like you don't hear the loss of accent.
Oh, okay.
But like when she speaks English, she just doesn't have like that Arab accent as my other aunts do. My mom hasn't. I haven't been to Lebanon with my mom ever. I went by myself for the first time. My grandma was there, but for the first time this past summer with my brother and stuff. But I've never seen my mom in her element in Lebanon. I don't know. I feel like something else Krashen was saying. I'm pronouncing his name right. That's how you guys are pronouncing it.
Crashing, yeah.
It's kind of like fun to say Krashen. Hold on. Sorry. I guess we never kind of talked about. I was just gonna say like how important it is like for like the input. You know how like comprehensible input and stuff, and like how it affects the learners.
I thought it was interesting. This is also jumping topics. The section talking about like mine was like mine was just talking about like linguistics for set 1 of the chapter 5. And it was talking about like Noam Chomsky's work and how like he focused a lot on like child development and language, and he said that since children acquire the basic rules of language without like formal instruction and extensive exposures to the models of language, yet they don't make certain types of like linguistic errors, like saying like I go. They wouldn't say like go I. They just like pronounce things wrong. Saying they gave the example of saying like paschetti instead of spaghetti and stuff like that. but we don't. They say that we as parents, well, we're not parents, so not we. Parents don't correct their kids on pronunciation because they know as they get older it'll just correct itself. But they don't. I thought it was so interesting that like we in our minds like innately know not to just like switch around the sentence structures of languages that we're just hearing but don't even fucking freaking crapping understand.
Like even little kids, I've never, like thinking about that, I've never heard little kids, like they mess up, right?
Yeah.
With English, but I've never heard them like put like the subject and the verb in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Or something.
They don't go, if
Like-
there's like, I want waffles, they don't go like, waffles want I.
Yeah.
They don't do that.
Yeah, they don't do that.
And they said that that's like, that, like normally developing children like won't make those types of errors. They'll only make like pronunciation and like sometimes they'll put like EDs on things that don't need EDs because they're like trying to follow like those types of rules, but like they don't mess up like the basic structures of the language. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah, like my nephew, when he asks for something like in English, it's perfectly fine. But sometimes in Spanish, like it's just sometimes off. And then what makes me laugh, he can't say ice cream. He always says ass cream. And like I do laugh about it and I do correct him, but he just can't say ice cream. He's like ass cream. Like I want ice cream. You want ice cream?
It's so funny.
Oh,
At Compass to Campus yesterday, there's this little boy that I worked with named Roberto, and there was the word ashore, and he said ass whore, and I was like, because I'm the only adult there, so I'm like shook, and I was just like, oh, it's a shore, sweetie. Like, woof, let's never say that ever again.
I actually like. There's this show I'm watching on Netflix. It's called The Good Place, and it's about like how it's basically like heaven and hell, but like different. And they kept on this one guy that wasn't supposed to be there. Was like saying like, "Oh, I'll take you guys to like my butthole," which the way he was saying it made it sound like he was saying butthole,
Mhm.
and they were very
This
confused.
is gotten super.
But when he said what he meant was budhole, like the place where him and his buds would hang out.
My
like,
butthole?
Yeah.
Guys, let's go to my butthole.
But
It's
obviously,
like a flash.
no, just like, so they were all, yeah, exactly. So they were all like, wait, where are you taking us? Like, what's happening now? Sorry, okay.
I think
Something
we've thoroughly deviated
Yeah.
from topic.
something I was asked in one of like the questions of the post was like, something about like Krashen's like research, theory, and then practice. And I think, obviously, in order for like, I don't remember exactly what I said, and I don't know what it is, and it's fine. Like research, like obviously in order for us to like want improvements and stuff, research has to be done, research has to be like proven, and like then a theory is created from the research that they make, right? Like through ELL students or whatever. And then through the theories they come up with because of the research, then they then have to practice to see if those are actually like, if that's actually what's happening. And I think it's like an important, like to give, shoot. Just blinked. I'm sorry.
Ask Amy.
Amy, I don't know. Sorry if you want to say anything. I'm just gonna throw your name in there again. Again, you can pass if you don't have anything to say.
I don't really know.
Yeah.
I just think that one of the things that I was reading was that, like, the first, like, language that we're introduced to is from, like, caregivers, and it's very dumbed down English, but it still has that sentence structure, like we were talking about, so I think that's why we still get the sentence structure correct, but, like, when we're kids, we still speak dumbed down English, because that's, like, you don't have somebody go, okay, say goodbye now, it's, you want to say bye-bye? It's kind of this, it's dumbed down English, but it still has some of that proper English into it, so I think that's why, as like first language English learners, we do have that structure to us, but it like also is we go bye-bye now. So
I wonder if that relates to what you were talking about with it. So
Yeah. I wonder what I was gonna say is like if we kept talking to our kids in that like baby voice, but like in that like tone their entire lives, if like they would only know how to talk, like speak English in that
would
like
everybody be
baby
speaking in
tone.
baby talk?
Yeah, if you made this elaborate heist with all your relatives to only talk to your baby in baby talk, would they only talk in baby talk?
Why do you think we do baby talk? Like obviously, like kids aren't fully.
I think just because they're so cute and
It sounds
small, you want to
absurd.
feel like
Like, hi,
super
say
cheesy
hi.
with them,
Yeah.
you know?
Rather than hello,
Well,
sport.
it
Yeah.
probably could be like a comprehension thing too, because like they are still developing, so like
Yeah,
you
it
don't
can be
want to
simple.
give them full sentences like, I would appreciate if you wouldn't make a mess with your food, young child, and be like, no messes, because they don't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is true.
Sorry, could you say that first part again? I want to hear you do that voice.
No.
I think that goes with the part of vocabulary being something that's learned. Like, they wouldn't know what appreciates means, but they would know what mess means a lot sooner.
I wonder if, like in sign language, like you were talking about, I wonder if they have child versions, like for little kids that are learning.
I
sign
hear that
language.
you mess up, like you fumble when you're signing, like when
But
you're
do they
signing.
do they talk to them in like? Do they just use formal sign language? Because I think it's always casual. Probably.
My thing is, how do you teach someone how to sign if they can't, like, how do you teach people words like appreciate and things like that in sign languages if all they know is like,
Well, sign language, you have like, they have like their own vocabulary. Like they have basic words, and then things that they don't have a word for, they can either use multiple signs to describe, or they just spell it out like an English word.
yeah, but how would they know
What the word means.
what it actually means if like,
They would sign like a scenario, like
yeah, but how do they learn the signs? You know, we learn like English through like reading it, hearing it, speaking it, and writing it, you know?
yeah.
Like, but all they can really do is like sign it and see it written, but they don't really know what that like, how do they connect what the signs mean to what they're thinking on the inside if they have no way of like expressing that beyond signs?
Yeah, I was
Well,
like, sorry.
Like, that's just so interesting to
Well,
me.
like appreciate, they have thank you, like thank you.
Yeah, but how do they know that that's what that means? You know, if someone keeps saying this to
How
you,
do we
how do you
what
know that
appreciate means?
that
Yeah.
means that?
Like,
You're
because
old
everybody's
enough.
experiences. I guess it's like, you know, have you ever seen those lists of words online where it's like, oh, you didn't know there was a word for that, like all these like special things that have words.
Like
for them.
crazy synonyms.
Yeah, there's like crazy words that people have never heard of for feelings that you can't like describe or something.
Yeah.
I think they set it up in like a. They would probably like relate it to the child in like a situation that they've gone through, and then tell them, oh, this is what that means.
But I wonder how they like connect with someone that this means like A, you know, or like what A is, you know? It's just weird to me to think about like not hearing it, speaking it, writing it, like all of those different things that we do, how they fully grasp like what things are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I don't know how, I know it works, but like Helen Keller, how the hell did she learn how to communicate? How? She can't see, she can't speak, and she can't hear.
Her teacher remember she like I don't know. If you
Yeah,
remember
with like
this.
senses, but
She
like
would put her hand to her face and like move her jaw and like she would like touch her.
but like how does she know that that means anything beyond like I have jaw
Well, she
pain?
would probably sign something to her.
But how does she know that the signing's supposed to mean anything, you know? Like what is she thinking in her head, you know? Because she's not thinking in signs.
Everybody has feelings and
No, I understand she's feeling feelings, but how does she put? A lot of the times when we're thinking things, we put our feelings into words and into sounds. Like sometimes people like hear their
Text
thoughts as like
messages.
sounds, and sometimes they see them as words. Whatever, whoever you are, but like they must see theirs in like colors or picture. Couldn't be pictures. They wouldn't know what the hell a picture looks like. You know, they wouldn't know what colors look like.
But
How do they?
That's just Helen
Bullshit.
Keller.
That's
Those.
blind people, not deaf people.
I need to know how Helen Keller communicated how she was feeling because honestly, it's a mystery to me.
What were you gonna say, Amy?
Yeah.
Oh, I was just saying, like, I mean, kids who speak don't necessarily know what words mean, so we explain them, and it's the same for sign language. Like, if you sign something and they're like, what does that mean? You have to explain it. It's the same in English, and it's the
Yeah.
same, like, when I was in German, and people would be like, oh, here's a word, and I'd be like, I don't understand. Please explain further. Like, it's not, like, just because they can't, I don't know, just because they can't verbally express it doesn't mean they don't have the means to express it in a way that the person who is confused can understand,
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Okay.
I mean,
Helen Keller's a mystery to me.
yeah.
That's my end all deal.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
She was. She's dead. RIP. HK.
She even learned signs like
She was.
just by touching, because she couldn't see.
Yeah, didn't she learn how to speak
She learned how to speak
a little bit, right?
everything by touch. She learned sign language by touch and speaking.
That's nuts.
That's crazy.
Well, I guess Helen Keller could use Braille because you don't need to see, hear, or do any of that
Easy
for
to
Braille.
Easy to feel.
Yeah.
But you'd have to learn the alphabet first.
Shuck. How do you know what A means when you see a collection
Or-
of dots, you know? That's what I'm trying to say. Is like,
Yeah.
how do you know that these 2 dots and 1 dot here means A, and then you're like, what the hell is A? Do I even know what A really is? I don't know anymore. And on that note, I'm going to leave you guys. Have a great weekend.
Bye. You
Sorry.
too. That was something like when I was reading Petito's article and stuff. Like I was like surprised and like confused about how sign language and spoken language, the children process to go through the exact same thing. Just because
Yeah.
someone is deaf does not mean that they are slow in any forms. Like when it comes to like growing up, like. Part of my post questions was like basically what are the stages, and like they both go through the babbling stage. And I'm like, how do you babble in sign language? Like how would that be? And I'm like, how? And then it goes to like the first word, and then I'm like, okay, well obviously there's like words in sign language, and it just like continues, and they have like the months are the exact same for both situations. But like as much as like I know there has to be a way because things are done, people are deaf, sign language is used, and obviously if I'm reading an article from this class, obviously like. It just proven that they don't like sign language children like go through the exact same thing as spoken. But for me, I have a hard time grasping like how. I find it incredible that that is the case. But like how is
I
it?
was surprised reading that.
Yeah.
I was just like, what?
Well, I think like everybody learns like and is capable of learning. They just learn it a different way. You know, like they fumble with their hands instead of their mouth.
But like that's why I'm wondering because how like kids, they like we were learning like linguistics or like with linguistics and stuff was like, okay, so we lose there's a whole bunch of phonemes and phonetics, right? But then we lose the ones we don't hear because we're obviously hearing stuff, right? For those who are speak and hear. But then because of that's how we're hearing, that's how we're able to then create those sounds, and that's why we start making those sounds because those are the words that are usually the most heard. So for sign language, how is it done? Like, do they just like sign until they're like? Do they make their children like? Do they move their children's hands in ways for them to like realize like what's happening?
I wonder if that's considered learning or acquisition.
Yeah.
I wonder if they also take them to like classes like before even starting like preschool and kinder. If they're like specific like classes for like the whole family.
I had my 2 best friends growing up were deaf. That's why I took sign language. But I used to go to their classes with them when they were young, and they got their they learned sign language. So like they went to these special, it's called like Jean Weingarten or something, school for the deaf. And so there's a ton of deaf children in this classroom, and it's like this fun activity classroom, and they learn how to sign and pronunciate, and they kind of work on like language with them and sign language. It's awesome.
That was like before they started school, or like
They were like, it was like kind of preschool age,
oh, okay.
and then like when they were like 5 or 6 or 7, and then when they were 7, they got their implants, their hearing implants, and now they can talk.
I
You wouldn't even
remember.
know that they were born deaf. They talk so good.
I remember when my first quarter in Woodring, I don't remember which class it was one of the LF classes. We learned or we watched a video on this family who like the mom or both the mom and the dad were deaf, and like their first child was deaf, and like their second child was deaf. By a certain time, the surgery was out, for the implant, and like being able to like didn't work on like being able to pronounce things. And so one of their daughter kind of wanted to do it, but like the mom was very against it, and like the parents were like, who speak, were like, why would you take away an opportunity for them? And she's like, I'm not taking away any opportunities. Like sign language is a language, but there was just so many different. I don't remember too much about it, but I remember like watching it and being like, wow, this is amazing. Like this is like yeah, sign language is obviously like a real language and stuff, but obviously those who can speak have an advantage just because there's a, like, you know what I mean? I mean, I feel like now they're like being able to they create things so like people who are deaf are more included and stuff. But like that's just like, I mean, that's happening now and like recently. It's not like it's been like that forever.
Yeah.
So in a classroom, and like a deaf, child comes to your class, like, what do you do?
Well, they wouldn't, I don't think they would throw a deaf child into a school alone like they do with ELL students.
Yeah.
Because they can't hear anything. I think they have to have an interpreter or I don't know. Maybe we should shut the windows.
Yeah, heroes also just have softer voices. Amy, do you have anything to say about sign language and?
Well, I did go to school with a deaf girl. I mean, she had hearing aids, so she was hearing capable, but that only does so much for some people, and so she did have an aide, and I never was in her class, but like she had an aide who was with her throughout elementary school through high school, and every elementary school class that she was in, the teachers in those classes did set aside time to teach all of the students the alphabet, so they could sign with her if they wanted to, and then like they learned some other like core, like it wasn't, they were trying to get her involved in the classroom by teaching some sign language to the other kids in the class. Like they would learn to sign songs together, and so it was very involved, and I think that is something that we need to start looking at for ELL students, because it's the same thing. They're learning, like, somebody who learns sign language as their first language, English is kind of, in a way, their second language. And so it's a way to get everybody involved, and we could be doing that with Spanish if you have a Spanish-speaking student in the class, and you could do it with Korean or Russian, like teach how they say the alphabet, how they say numbers, what are their colors, and it's just a way to get more language acceptance, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because you can, like, if you know who's in your classroom that is learning English, like that, like you can Google their alphabet. Like it doesn't take, or look at a book, it doesn't take too long to find something basic you could teach a class so they can all like be involved and stuff.
You know how they say, like, once you get older and when you want to learn a new language, it's a bit harder for you to, like, grasp and stuff? So would it be harder for us to, like, learn sign language? Or is it a lot easier because, like, you could see the symbols and...
Well, I think
it would be easier just because it's American Sign Language, so you still have some base in English.
Okay.
So it is a different language, but it would... I want to say it would be kind of like learning, like no, it's wrong. I was gonna say it would be like learning the different phrasing and stuff for different English-speaking countries, like, but harder, in a way.
Yeah.
I thought, I definitely feel like sign languages is becoming something that they're like trying to make a little bit more inclusive. When I was working or like volunteering at the Club Lectura at a school. I don't remember what it's called for some reason, the school. Even though it was like a Spanish club and like we were only supposed to teach Spanish, not only supposed to teach Spanish, but that's what we were working on. They also did sign language. Like we would learn the alphabet, and every day, every like Wednesday or Tuesday and Thursday, whatever it was, we would practice those alphabets, like the alphabet, like A, B, C, A to Z. We would learn it in Spanish, like the pronunciations in Spanish, but then we would also do it in sign language, which I thought was so cool.
I did that in elementary.
Yeah, I don't remember ever learning the alphabet in elementary or middle school that I can remember. And I just think that's awesome. I mean, sign language wasn't even a class that was offered at my high school. So now that they're, even in clubs, after school clubs, something that's more free will, teachers or people who are in charge of those things or organizations are like still trying to, even though you're like, English, you obviously are learning Spanish or have Spanish speakers at home. Here's the alphabet for sign language. I thought that was really cool. Something else I thought was really cool in Petito's article is how sign language also has accents. I was like, what?
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know it.
I did not know that either. It's like how they're like compared it to something in like Canada and like
Oh, yeah,
French
yeah.
and stuff, and I'm like, I don't get like how. I mean, how it must be the way like you use sign like to pronounce like because obviously when you sign like there's a translation for signs, right? So there's different dialects of all languages. There's obviously different dialects of sign languages throughout like the area, but like the accent.
Yeah. Well, it's like I took like a couple quarters of it in like my community college, but my teacher said that like because you have like basic forms like E, but some people do it like they'll like move their hand a little bit different or like
Yeah.
they'll have different styles, but they go off the basic forms like of the ASL, which is kind of interesting. And like when they have names, when they do names, they have like special signs for your name. They don't just spell it out.
Yeah.
So like your name will have a sign.
So do you know like the
And so,
sign for your
like,
name?
If they give a hearing person a sign for your name, like that's considered like a sign of respect that they like gave you a sign for your name, which is cool.
That is cool. So like, does that sign does it mean something? Is there like a meaning to that sign,
It just,
or is it just
yeah,
like the name?
like usually like he had us like create like a mock name, and so you would base it off something like that means something to you, like I said like music because I play a lot of music. So then like my name starts with a J, so mine was like this, like a little bit,
Cool.
like so it'd be something like that. Like they kind of like I don't know,
That's awesome.
kind of going off topic.
No, it's not. I think it's still talking about sign language.
ASL is so cool.
It is. I was just very shocked. Like I was talking to my roommate about it, and like obviously like what I was reading was true because I'm reading it for a purpose. But then at the same time, like I wasn't necessarily understanding it, and then also like my friend was like, that's no way." I'm like, "Well, I'm reading it. She wouldn't give me something to read that was false. Like this is obviously like real information, and we were just confused on how it was actually like done. So now I'm like interested in that."
So what do you
Yeah.
think about like the grammar? Like is it very useful? Is it valuable? Or what do you guys think
What,
about?
in
What do you
English?
mean?
Yeah, like after learning the language, learning grammar, or should it be taught at the same time?
Oh, like do you mean you need
Like the
to
grammar
learn
of the
how to
language.
speak
Yeah,
before you learn grammar?
yeah.
Well, I think it kind of goes hand in hand because you can't form a sentence without having grammar, because you have the subject and verb thing like we've been learning about, like the order.
That's something else sign language also has that has the same
Yeah.
order. Sorry. That was very nasally. I did not like the way that just sounded.
That is interesting though, because I think like your first language, like you just instinctually know the grammar of
Yeah.
it, like the order, the subject, object, verb order.
Yeah.
But your second language, you probably have to learn that because you
Yeah, you do.
just acquired it with your first language, but your second language you probably have to learn that. So it's probably more important in a second language.
I definitely saw that my grammar, like, I've taken grammar classes in Spanish here at Western, and I've definitely struggled. But then I went and I took a translation class when I was in Spain, and this was it was like all in Spanish. Like we'd always translate something from Spanish to English or English to Spanish, and there obviously is very like you need to know your grammatical situation when it comes to Spanish, and I definitely saw an improvement in like the grammatics of me translating something versus me here in the U.S. because I'm obviously like surrounded by this language where grammar is definitely like implied and used when it's spoken, and so it definitely like it's something that comes I feel like with the language. Like we were
Like
talking earlier.
subconsciously?
Yeah, subconsciously. Thank you. Like we were saying earlier, like we never like say going guy or like our sentences always like somewhat make sense. It's like the things that we mess up with is like the eds or like the tenses and all those kind of things, and same with kids, right? But I feel like when it comes to the first language, we kind of just pick it up because we repeat what we hear around us.
Yeah.
What do you think, Amy?
I don't know, my brain just like backtracked to like the beginning of this conversation for some reason
That's
when
okay.
Jessica was talking about like how her mom learned like different like accent of English or dialect of English than like what we consider normal for her like race. And I was like just thinking about the reading. I think it was just the part that I read. I don't know, but it was saying like how two towns like right next to each other, and like where the bulk of the work is coming from like this specific like factory for both towns, but like one is predominantly white and the other is predominantly black, and so the children had completely different like dialects and like ways of speaking and like ways of like what's proper and what's not. So like I don't know, I was just thinking about how hard that could be for like if you were an English language learner who had to move around a lot on top of everything. My brain just went different direction, but it did, and that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, that's kind of like what we talked about in linguistics. Like, how do you, when she was talking about like, if you have like children in your class speaking the, what is it called, the AAVE?
Oh, yeah.
Like, how do you like respect that language, but also teach them?
I was
like,
in that
English?
group,
I don't know.
and something was my like topic was like the implications of teaching. And what I was reading was that they use, because like vernacular or like the African American vernacular English, which is what the AAV stands for, because it's like basically like their first the first dialect they learned. So like they grew up hearing it. They used examples. And then they would use like a sentence example in AAVE or Aves, which is how Bethel's pronouncing it, and then this like in like the English we speak, and then she would compare the sentences and she would make them identify which sentence was which and why, and what makes them what it is. And I feel like that's like it's not like you're putting like it's respecting it. Like obviously at least you're bringing it up to the lesson where you're identifying it as a language versus not identifying it or bringing it up at all. So that was one of the ways they like implicated it in classrooms, was like teachers would use it to compare it to other sentences.
Yeah, I think that's important to like acknowledge ELL kids as like, yes, your language is important in you, but also to teach them the other English, like, because it's like Beth said, it's like the power language. Like,
yeah.
So you got to give them access to it, but also.
I also think it's. Oh, you can continue.
No, I'm done.
You're good.
Okay. Well, I was just thinking like it's important not to overcorrect somebody, because like it's that whole they're trying to acquire the language. So like if you can understand what they're saying, for the most, like if the message is clear and they just kind of screwed up the grammar a little bit, I think it's important not to like jump on that every single time, because like they're obviously getting it and you don't want to discourage them. It's that whole anxiety thing that the guy was talking about. Like if you overcorrect somebody every single time they make a mistake, like it's just going to stress them out and they're not going to want to talk and they're going to put that block up. So I think you have to find a balance between like, okay, that was really wrong, I need to correct you, versus, oh, you didn't say it quite right. Like, I get what you're saying. I might correct you in the answer to your question, like, just phrasing it.
Yeah. I think you have to meet the person, like, at their level of, like, where they're at in the language, you know?
Well, that's what I was saying last week, read somewhere where a student, an ELL learner, was like, their teacher basically wanted them to put all their ideas on pieces of paper. She didn't care how sentences were written or how they were spelled. She just wanted her to like get the confidence to be able to like use the information she knows, both like from her first language and now learning her second language, on a piece of paper. And then she got to the point where she was confident enough, because she was never corrected. She was like, always just motivated to like use the information she has. Then she realized that like she wanted her stuff to be like understood and read by her peers, which is when the teacher realized like, okay, she had the confidence enough, or she's like strong enough to now be a little bit corrected and get a little bit extra attention in the form of like correcting, like, this is how you would write this, or this is what this letter, like, this is how you make this letter sound, and that's why this is spelled this way, and make that connection. Because I mean, even for me, like, compared to all my cousins and stuff, like, my English, I mean, obviously it's my first language, but I'm always being corrected constantly. and I
And
always
how does that make you feel?
and I hate it. Like I'm like, you know what I meant. Like I get it.
Yeah.
Like, if you, and my sister Marcella has the best way of doing it because she makes me feel like she's like, oh, I understand. She like answers my question, but by the way, you know, or like what you were saying, Amy, like she answers me in a way where I realize I said something wrong. Because half the time I do realize I said something wrong or pronounced things wrong or used the wrong word or something, but they don't even give me enough time to correct myself, and I feel like that definitely affected my self-confidence because I'm probably like, I love all my cousins and my sisters, don't get me wrong and everything, but like they are all very self-confident people, and
Yeah.
I don't feel the same way about myself. Like sometimes I can be very confident, but I'm very like, when it comes to my education and like my academics, I'm very like shaky about it because I feel like I don't have the confidence, which leads to my Spanish, because whenever my dad puts me on the spot, he's like, oh, this person speaks Spanish, go practice your Spanish with them right in front of them. I'm like, oh my god, bad. And it eats me up. Like, if I like were to do it like by myself and like it happens naturally, I'll tend to like do it. I'll be fine. Or like if I'm drunk, my Spanish will be very good. And like that just leads to like, you know, not caring.
Did you learn it when you were drunk?
I know I didn't learn it when I was drunk, but
Because
when
I've
I'm
heard
drunk,
that like if you learn
learn
something
something.
when you're drunk.
No, I've never learned Spanish drunk, but I definitely like, for me it's just the confidence. Like when I'm drinking, I don't
Well,
care.
it's probably like you're not as aware of everything, so that anxiety part kind of
Doesn't play a role.
disappears.
Yeah.
Because
Which is
you tipsy.
which is exactly what Krashen was saying. Like when you have a self-motivated, a confident, and a low anxiety student, they're more willing to like comprehend the input that's being put to them, versus
Yeah.
someone who is not confident, not motivated, and not and has like high anxiety.
I think about it like when you're learning how to write in English, you know, like in English classes and stuff. Like sometimes you like, have you ever been partners with someone where they have like so many things wrong, like, but like you can only, I don't know, when I've had to do like peer reviews and there's like a lot of mistakes in the paper, but I can't tell them how many there are. Like I just have to say like, oh well, maybe don't do this. Like,
I don't know what that
sorry,
was.
that was my phone.
Oh.
But like with little kids, like you can't be like, no, you can't be like down on them so much because they haven't learned that much
Yeah.
yet, you know. That's what I'm saying. If that makes sense.
What are some other questions you think that we kind of talked about? I guess for us it was definitely like the sign language, right?
Yeah, and I think also like how you enforce grammar while also holding importance on acquisition,
Okay.
I think was what we were talking about.
Okay, so our many questions are, and I'll like go back and type these up. Is one like how is, I don't know, how do you phrase the sign language part? Like how is sign language used? I don't even know how to say it.
What were we confused about?
We were
Like
confused.
how is sign language, I don't know, we were talking about like how is it learned?
Yeah,
You're not hearing?
you're not hearing. You're just like
Oh, how do you learn English?
by hearing things.
By hearing, because you're able to
No, but
hear.
but what if they're deaf and they
That's
only
the-
know sign language? How do they learn English? Wasn't that?
I
what
think
the
I'm
other
just
thing?
confused by it because like I talk with my, oh, you guys can't see me, so that was awkward. I talk with my hands, but then they actually like talk with their hands. So it's like, to me, like trying to learn that as an infant, it's like, how do you distinguish I'm gesturing versus I'm telling you something?
Yeah,
Alright.
that's a good point.
Okay, cool. So I will type up better questions.
Better phrased
And then-
questions.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Bye, Amy. Just joking.